How are protected civilian objects identified in IHL? Imagine walking through a city during a conflict and trying to tell which buildings are safe and which could be targeted. That's what international humanitarian law aims to clarify. It helps parties in conflict distinguish between civilian objects and military targets. This process is called identification. Under international humanitarian law, civilian objects are things that are not used for military purposes. These include homes, schools, hospitals, and places of worship. The law explicitly protects these objects from being attacked. But how do we know which is which? It starts with understanding their function and use. If a building is used for civilian activities and not for military ones, it is considered a civilian object. Some civilian objects have special protection because they are especially important or vulnerable. For example, hospitals and medical transports are protected because they save lives. Cultural sites like museums or historic monuments also get special protection. Dams, nuclear power plants, and other infrastructure that contain dangerous forces are also recognized as civilian objects unless they are used for military purposes. These objects are identified based on what they do and their importance, not just by physical appearance. To help identify protected objects, parties in conflict often use signs or emblems. Medical units display symbols like the Red Cross or Red Crescent to show they are protected. These symbols tell everyone that these objects and personnel must not be targeted. However, there is no universal sign for civilian buildings or goods in general. So, commanders have to carefully verify the purpose of each object before any attack. When objects serve both civilian and military purposes, the situation gets trickier. These are called dual-use objects. If they are used for military goals and meet the criteria of a military target, they can be targeted. But the law requires careful checks to avoid harming civilians or damaging civilian objects unnecessarily. The identification process also covers new areas like cyber infrastructure. While there is debate about whether data itself can be protected, the physical hardware that stores or transmits data is considered an object. Its protection depends on whether it is used for civilian or military purposes. In practice, identifying protected civilian objects involves checking what the object is used for, recognizing special categories like hospitals or cultural sites, and looking for protective signs. Commanders must verify the status of objects before attacking and use precautions to prevent harm to civilians. They also consider the proximity of military targets to civilian objects and apply proportionality to limit damage. This system helps ensure that civilians and their property are protected during conflicts. It's a key part of the rules that aim to reduce suffering and keep the principles of humanitarian law alive even in war.